Welcome to the Contrarians and to our topic, Top 5 Concert Experiences. This is a part 2. We did a part 1 in 2022, so this is a follow-up. This is also the last show with a video era, so enjoy the audio. Let's go. Welcome to the Contrarians, and tonight we have a great topic, a topic that has made an appearance again, I must say. We're going to do our top 5 concert experiences. And tonight, look at this panel. We've got Dan from Off the Charts. We've got, look at this, ladies and gentlemen, we've got Rand Kelly here tonight. We've got Keith, we've got Nick Esquire, and the Parish of Rock. So let's get started. We're going to go 2, 2, and 1, and we're just going to go around and just gonna have a good old time. So, gentlemen, nice to see you all tonight. I'm gonna go as I see it. I'm gonna go Dan, Rand, Keith, Nick, Parish, and we'll just zip around like that. So, Dan, what are your first 2 choices?
All right. So, my, I guess, 5th choice would be I got into Alice Cooper in 1989. That was my first concert ever with Trash. Good show, but then I went backwards and got everything, and then I'm like, well, there's so much more to this guy. So, a couple of years went by where there was nothing happening here in Ottawa, and then, of course, they announced that he was coming over for the Last Temptation tour at the National Arts Centre here in Ottawa, and wow, like, talk about... And that's what I like about Alice Cooper there. He always plays all these little deep cuts every show. And like I got to hear Halo of Flies for the first time, From the Inside Live for the first time. Like all these odd songs. And I loved that from him. So I'm going to go with the last 10. I don't remember who opened. And it's not important. I don't remember anything at all. I just remember that show. And my 4th pick would actually be... It was actually an acoustic set, cost my buddy and I, and this was in 2003. $39 to see a band acoustic, and it was for the tour of Tesla Into the Now. And we looked at each other, me and my buddy goes, this was the best $39 we've ever spent. Got to meet the band. You can see I got it signed, and it was... I don't know how to explain. I'm not a fan of acoustic shows, but actually 5-man electrical band is from Ottawa. So when they sang Signs, they actually got the singer, the original singer, to go and sing with them. The whole set was acoustic until the last song, which was electric, and they played War Pigs. And no encore, no BS. It was just like one show. And apparently I don't know the 5-man acoustical jam album because I don't own it, but apparently there's one song that they sing on that where someone falls down, and literally as it happens, the bass player was sitting on a stool and literally fell backwards, and the whole place is laughing except me because I didn't understand the reference. But anyway, so yeah, I'm going to go with Into the Now, the acoustic show here. Like, wow. So there you go. Those are my 2, 5th and 4th.
All right, cool. This is going to be an interesting show because I was just thinking while you're talking, Rand's on here tonight. And if anybody has ever followed Rand, he's seen everybody on the planet. Are you going to talk about seeing Jimi Hendrix? I can't remember where you're going to start tonight. You never know what Rand's going to say, so everybody brace yourselves. I'm sure it's going to be something.
I'll tell you what I haven't seen. I haven't seen the Beatles, I haven't seen Jimi Hendrix, and I haven't seen the Moody Blues.
I've got a buddy that saw Hendrix here in Columbus, and it was Soft Machine open for him. It was 67, I think.
That had to be strange.
Well, it happened. It's true. Anyway, what's your 2?
Yeah, my number 5, I'm going to go kind of in a weird order, but it's going to be chronological kind of. But my number 5 is a really bizarre, my first concert. I was living in Las Vegas because I was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, and I was 18 or 19. And in the on New Year's Eve, 1971, Chicago, a band from Chicago called Maduro, which was invited by Chicago to tour with them, and they were a hot trio, just killer hard rock band. The Hughes Corporation, Don't Rock the Boat. Fat Dorf and Rodney, a duet acoustic guitar guys that were really, 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 really long hair and very good. And I always liked them. And some guy named Dave Blue, who is kind of like a Bob Dylan kind of guy, just sit there and with an acoustic guitar by himself. The first three acts that I just said, the last three that I said, were an actual dinner in a different room of the arena where Chicago played. And I remember we had Cornish game hen and rice pilaf, and I never had that ever. And it was really good. And I just wanted to say, seeing Terry Kath was a revelation. I was so into Chicago. I wanted to see these guys so bad. And Terry was just like God. And I was sitting like in the upper balcony across this huge round rotunda kind of thing. And they were down on the stage. And you couldn't see shit, they were just little. But man, I just stared at Terry all night long. I mean, as an upcoming guitar player, I wanted to learn so much, and it was just like an educational experience for me. But that was a wonderful concert. And my number 4 is seeing Emerson, Lake and Palmer for the first time on the Works tour at San Francisco Civic Center in 1977, and they just dropped the orchestra because they couldn't afford them anymore. And they were phenomenal. Those three guys pulled off Pirates and Fanfare for the Common Man, and all their hits like Tarkus and stuff. They didn't need an orchestra. They were just absolutely fantastic. One of my favorite concerts ever. And that's it for the first two, 5 and 4.
Oh, those aren't very good concerts, Rand. I don't know. Can't imagine you'd pick those. Incredible, though. Oh, dang. Yeah. I can't even compete. All right, Keith, dazzle us. I don't know if you can compete with Rand, but I'd give it a shot.
Well, I approached this. I mean, I've seen many shows, but I tried to keep it to a lot of these are not typical contrarian fodder, but we'll get started here. We'll see how it goes. Number 5, I picked. I had to include this, my very first show, and it was an impressive show, and it kind of set the bar for concerts. It was 1981. I was 16. Prior to that, I begged to go to shows, and my parents would always tell me, they have nothing to do with it. They weren't going to let me go. Once I turned 16 and could get in the car and go myself, they just go. So, Labor Day weekend of 1981, I got in the car and took a girl who I was pretty fond of, and we went to the great Allentown Fair, Allentown, PA, and we witnessed Pat Benatar, she was on her huge trajectory. She was tooting her 3rd record. And it was just, it was my first real rock concert. And so I guess it probably wouldn't have taken much to impress me, but it was impressive. Her voice is incredible. She commanded the stage. She had a really tight band in those early days. She was on album number 3, and it was just a great show and a great experience. And she brought David Johansen with her. He was on either, I don't know if it was his 2nd or 3rd solo record. You know me, Mr. Prop Guy. She was pushing Precious Time, and his album was called Here Comes the Night, and it's a really good record. He did a great show. He did a bunch of the Dolls stuff. And that particular record was very straightforward, fit right in with the rock of the day. And it was a great show. So I had to include it because it was my first. And I really, it was impressive. And I'm sure it was because it was the first one. But I always kind of held everybody to that standard. So there you go. That's my number 5. And we're doing 2, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. So my next one. This is pretty in line with what we discuss here. A year later, in 1983, same venue. The reason I picked this one was actually it was 2 years later. So I became the concert junkie in 81, And I had seen a lot of things prior to this show in particular, but in June of 83, I noticed a seismic shift in the audience, and that's when Def Leppard brought the girls into the mix. And suddenly, when you went to a hard rock show, it wasn't a sea of guys. It was almost like a 50-50 split in the audience. And suddenly, it was a much more interesting experience to go to a show. So Def Leppard was on their way up with Pyromania. Photograph was all over MTV, and they put on a terrific show. They were young. Joe could sing. Everyone was, they had just switched guitar players, but, everything was happening. It was a really great show. It was a double bill. They had Crocus open for them, which Crocus started on that tour, but got kicked off of it. So I got to see Crocus before they got thrown off the tour. Mark was kind of making fun of Joe. He was repeating Joe's shtick. Every band does it. Paul Stanley is probably the most infamous one, where they come out and say their same shtick at every show. And so Mark was kind of getting to it before Joe did. They were he was running up behind the front stage onto Leppard's set. And anyway, they got thrown off, but it was great that I got to see them before they got thrown off that tour. That was the Headhunter record. So they were in their metal prime, and it was actually a triple bill. Guitar player that none of us really knew very well back then, but Gary Moore was the opener on that. And that was June of 83, and that was a great show as well. So there's my first two.
Wow. Dang. That's pretty great. All right.
Show. Yeah.
Yeah, as you guys are going through, I keep thinking, because I know Nick and I were on that show before, and I'm going through, I already know what I picked on the other show when we talked about this. How funny. Oh, well. What goes around comes around. Nick, do you got anything for us? What's your two?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two that I didn't mention back in 2022 of March when we did this before.
Is that when it was? Okay.
Yeah, I looked it up. I really babbled, so I don't want to do it again. I'll direct everybody to that video and give you some later. And Keith just floored me with that Gary Moore. He buried the lead. Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
Who I've never seen. That's one of my great disappointments.
Me neither.
I'm going to give you I'm going to start with the show that is the most recent that I've seen that I think is in the top 5. Typically, when I think of great shows, what stands in my memory, it's when I was a teenager, kid, and those things stand out. You can almost remember them moment by moment. But this was a show that I saw in September of 2022 by an artist that we don't usually talk about much on the Contrarians, but it would be Lucinda Williams. And I saw her in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at a small theater. I had seen her several times with my lady prior to this, and I've actually seen her once since then. But the reason why this was special was she had had a stroke sometime during COVID, and I was sort of aware of it in a passing way and didn't know too much about it. When we were at the venue and had good seats, she came out, and immediately we realized that the stroke, or the effects of the stroke, were profound and serious. She had to be led to the stage, arm in arm with someone, and she had to sit on a chair, which she sat on for the whole performance. And she normally plays guitar, and she couldn't play the guitar. So immediately, this was different, and sort of, I felt like at the beginning we were going to be on the edge of a knife, and it was going to be a tightrope walk. However, that was sort of the beauty of it, because she gutted through this performance. And even though she may have been technically less proficient, albeit with a unique voice anyway and style, it was really heartfelt and emotional. So her speech was a bit stilted. She would even forget. She was trying to find the words when she was talking to the crowd, but it had the effect of the crowd being with her and sort of egging her on and being with her for every step of the way. And it turned out to be the best performance I've ever seen with her. And it was fantastic. And she oftentimes gets a little political on messages, the crowd. And this was right after the Dobbs decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. So he was sort of, encouraging everyone to be active out there. But if she could do it basically after a stroke that way, it certainly was inspirational to a lot of people in that crowd. So I'd give her that show just rose to the top 5. I asked my lady about shows that we've seen, and that was the first one she mentioned. So I think that was something that just stood out for me, and I'll be remembering that one for a long time. The second one I will give you, maybe just for selfish reasons, but 1993, little club in Philadelphia, the Chestnut Cabaret, no longer with us, but I was able to see and stand front and center of the stage Jack Bruce. And Jack Bruce, I did find this ticket, but this is a little later. This is Cream in 2005, which I saw them at Madison Square Garden. But Jack Bruce in the club, his band was Gary Husband on drums, who is a renowned jazz artist in his own right, a piano player, etc. But he's playing drums. And the guitar player is Blues Saraceno, who actually played with Poison of all people, and has been around on the scene, sort of like a hard rock metal guy. But I got to see, Jack, who I think is on the Mount Rushmore for me, are bass players and vocalists, still at the height of his powers before he had health problems, ripped through not only all the Cream tunes that we know and would want to hear live, but his solo work, which I had never seen. And the show was just one of those moments in time, if you're front and center with him, and he started the show off actually by bringing out a keyboard, and he played a piano tune or two, just himself smoking a cigarette with the band not there. But then he ramped it up. So for selfish reasons, it would be Jack Bruce in a tiny club. Memorable. I remember that one forever. And it was weird. They raffled off a Warwick bass guitar that night too, with LED lights. So that was kind of strange.
That'd be nice to have won. Yeah.
I know. I think
Warwick, that's not cheap. A Warwick's not cheap.
No, with the LED lights. As a matter of fact, he said, he goes, I like this myself. I mean, because he was a Warwick guy. But again, it was. I was trying to look for the set list. There's a partial set list on Setlist FM, not the whole thing, but the songs that you'd want to hear, he did. And the good thing is he had some jams, but he didn't stretch them out to 15 minutes in length, which would have been a bit tedious in 93. But that would be my second one.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. Warwick bass, I'll be damned. Yeah, your Lucinda Williams comment made me think of something that I don't know if I've ever really talked about it. Anyway, Parish, what's your 2?
Okay, well, I'm going to start with the first concert I ever went to, or at least the first proper concert I ever went to. I've seen a few local bands beforehand, and it was the 1st of November 1979, and it was AC/DC on the Highway to Hell tour. Sadly, it was at Hammersmith Odeon. The opening act was a young band that nobody had ever heard of. They didn't even have a record deal at the time. A band, don't know what happened to them. They were called Def Leppard. Not sure what happened to them anyway. They were the openers. But yeah, that was AC/DC with what I consider to be the definitive lineup of Bon Scott, Angus and Malcolm Young, Cliff Williams and Phil Rudd on drums. So yeah, fantastic first concert. We were front row of the balcony, slightly to the left if you're looking at the stage. Brilliant view, and yeah, just blew me away really. 4 tracks off that album, which remains my favourite album of all time. So they played 4 tracks from that. Kicked off with Live Wire. I won't go through the set list, we don't have time, but they played all the classics that you would have expected at that time. And then sadly, within 4 months, Bon was no longer with us. So bit of sweet really, but yeah, very fond memory. First concert I ever went to, and one of my favourite concerts of all time. So that's my first one. I'm going to generally go chronological for my concerts, with the exception of the last one. I'm going to go with my favourite concert of all time for my last one. So the next one is 1980, Wembley Stadium. Yeah, September 1980, Wembley Stadium, and it was Kiss on the Unmasked tour. So that was Gene and Paul and Ace with Eric Carr on the drums. We were 4 rows from the front, dead centre to the stage. I've still got 2 guitar picks that I got from Paul Stanley. I nearly caught the fire helmet as it was chucked out, but I didn't quite get to it in time. Spent the whole time standing on the chairs, cheering. My voice was absolutely hoarse by the end of it. And then I skipped work the next day so I could buy tickets because they were playing their second night. I didn't have tickets for the second night. So I skipped work the next morning and went and got tickets for the next night. So that's my second one, Kiss, 1980 at Wembley Arena.
Holy crap. That's great.
Nice.
Well, I'm also, I guess I'll play. I'm trying to think of other things that I haven't mentioned before. So I'm going to go with 1990, which we were in German Village at a bar on Parsons Avenue, and the artist was, it kind of reminded me of the Lucinda Williams choice, but Laura Nero was there, and it was just
Oh.
her by herself and just playing piano and singing. Now, if you know Laura Nero, she wrote a lot of people covered her stuff, Three Dog Night, Fifth Dimension, all kinds of stuff. She played at Woods, she played at Monterey Pop Festival. People really, she's not so much known for her own work, but people covering her stuff, but absolutely phenomenal. And then she later passed away. I think she had, I think she passed away from cancer, though, not too far down the road after that, but it was very intimate. There wasn't a whole lot of people there, but it was phenomenal. She was absolutely brilliant. One of the other ones that I really enjoyed that I saw back in the day, I don't know if I've ever talked about it or not, but Stashes in downtown, well, it's kind of north of downtown Columbus, which was an old club, very intimate, very small, but I got to see the Lemonheads and Juliana Hatfield. I think Juliana, I can't remember who opened for who. Because, if you follow any Lemonhead stuff, Juliana's kind of floating around the Lemonheads a lot. And, is on a couple of those records doing backgrounds and stuff. But I can't remember. I think it was Juliana opened up for the Lemonheads. And that was just very small. But, man, Lemonheads were great. Evan Danda was great. Juliana Hatfield was great. I just always, I don't know, just was a great show. That was before Lemonheads really took off in the 90s, and it was just a good era. I just remember that. That's just a great show. But that's a little lesser known. I don't usually talk about those, but equally impressive to me. Anyway, Dan, what's your next two?
All right, so 3 and 2 for me. So this one has So this artist was touring with Deep Purple and then decided to go off, when they do these one-off, these opening bands will do a one-off in a bar and all that. So I was in Montreal. I'm like, I see that Dio was going to be in town in Montreal alone. I was like, okay, I need to get tickets for that. So I got on a bus, went there. But before I did, this was 2003. So for the Killing the Dragon tour. And I guess I read some interview that, Dio was doing some meet and greets, and if you want to just go and email the fan club, whatever. I literally just emailed them. Like, I heard you guys, have backstage passes. Yeah, there'll be 2. This is free, by the way. Meet and greet in 2003, free. So, yeah, well, you'll have 2 backstage passes waiting for you at the box office. So he was touring with Deep Purple, then went off to do in Montreal called Le Medley, which is a bar there, no longer there, which had Voivod opening for them. And this was actually a secret gig because this was the return of Snake. This was the first show that he did back when there was that guy, Eric Forrest, that was singing for Voivod. And of course, he was touring, Dio was touring Killing the Dragon. Great show. But then I went and got those backstage passes, and sure enough, they were real. Like that, you're a little iffy at first, and you're like, this is going to be real, that this is free. Backstage passes, which I actually did twice with Dio. The second time was a misunderstanding that I didn't get to go to. But yeah, I got to meet him. Nicest guy ever. Got my picture taken with him, got a whole bunch of gear and all that. And that picture of me and Ronnie James Dio actually ended up on his DVD, Evil and Divine. If you look at the main menu, if anybody has this, I forget which page I'm at there. But yeah, so that was just finding out by accident that he's going to be doing a solo show, and then just asking, is there a backstage pass? And I still can't believe right now they're people are charging $1,000 or whatever for a VIP meet and greets. This was free. So I'm eternally grateful for Dio for that, for giving me backstage passes twice, but I was only able to go to one. So that's my number 3. And my number 2 would be the first time I saw my favorite band, which is Kiss. So they had Slaughter as the opener, which I love, Winger, which I love even more, and of course this was the Hot in the Shade tour. This was 89, 90, I forget the exact date there, but we were just like kids in a candy store. Like, this was our first time seeing our favorite band. We were, note to self, do not buy 8 tickets at the same time for a bunch of people, because you're going to be sitting in the toilets. And sure enough, I didn't see there was the Sphinx, because of their shit tickets. There was some speakers in the way, so we actually didn't get to see the Sphinx on the stage. But you know what? It was like, Winger is one of my favorite bands. That was actually probably my favorite drum solo I've ever seen live. And like I said, Slaughter is great too. But yeah, my first time seeing Kiss, I was very, and I've seen them, 10, 12 times since there. But yeah, that one holds a special place as the first time I got to see my favorite band. So there you go. Number 2 and 3.
Excellent. All right, cool. Yeah, that Kiss one, made me think of yet another show. You guys are all over it. All right, Rand.
Hey.
Dazzle us
Okay.
with a couple more.
Well, Nick, I saw Jack Bruce with Ringo Starr on the Vertical Man Tour in 1999 in Eureka, California. It was pretty amazing. Todd Rundgren, Gary Brooker. God, what a lineup. He was so good. Also, I forgot what I was going to say. Anyways, okay, here's my number 3. I saw Al Di Meola in UK with Alan Holdsworth and Bill Bruford opening with John Wetton and Eddie Jobson. Oh, we got a little drink. Sacramento Convention Center, August 1978, touring this album. Phenomenal. My first time seeing Holdsworth, about one of 7 times. But my God, that guy just makes you want to quit guitar. I mean, he's so freaking good. But yeah, Al Di Meola was like, my God, is this guy going to ever find an end to anything? I just couldn't.
Are you talking
handle
about
it anymore.
noodling? Rand?
He noodled so much. I mean, Holdsworth has these beautiful melodies on the UK album that are just, especially on the first song, In the Dead of Night. That's my actual favorite, Alan Holdsworth playing on that. But he plays these melodies that just sort of float and do things. And then every now and again, he'll go, but he'll stop and he'll go into melodies again. And Al Di Meola was just like all night long. And we just looked at each other, me and my friends, and goes, why are we sitting? We literally came for UK. In fact, my grandmother made me a T-shirt with the emblem. I'll show it again in case you don't know what it looks like. But that red emblem right there, had a white T-shirt. She had designed that emblem for me because she was a really good seamstress, and I was living with her at the time. So I walked into that concert wearing that shirt. People just, it was like I was a magnet. Everybody just came to me and said, how'd you get that? How'd you get that? I go, my grandma made it. Like, oh my God. They're flipping out.
Rand, changing people's lives then.
That shirt disappeared over time. It just fell apart and faded into the dust that it came from. Okay. And then, oh God, you guys are going to hate me for this. My number 2,
Landlines.
First time ever seeing Genesis. Peter Gabriel just happens to be singing and playing flute. It's at the Berkeley Community Theater, January 22nd, 1975. My whole life was just absolutely blown apart that night. They said, my friends kept saying, oh, I've seen Genesis many times. They don't do encores. They did 2, Watch of the Skies and The Musical Box in full costume. I mean, it was just amazing. And the last thing was, the end of The Musical Box. And then there's just huge pyrotechnics, explosion and everything, smoke everywhere. I mean, it was just unbelievable concert. But yeah, I've seen Genesis 3 times, but that was definitely my favorite time seeing them. I love the Peter Gabriel era Genesis. I can't get enough.
All right. Cool. All right, Rand, thanks. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Keith, you're up. What's your next two?
Okay, my next one is, I don't know what everyone's experience was, but back in the day, especially like the high school years, you kind of had to almost pick a lane. You know, if you were a metalhead, you couldn't expose yourself that you were into the pop stuff and so on and so forth. But things got better as time went on, and now that really doesn't exist. But two factions that kind of came together was, though, the metalheads and the punkers seemed to be kind of okay with each other. And so this was Halloween night, 1982, the perfect night for it, at my local community college. And it was a funky little theater. I tried to figure out if there's a specific name for it. I guess it would have been called a theater in the round, theater down on the floor level. And the seating was extremely steep. The worst place you could have a punk show. It was dangerous, but it was the Misfits.
Oh, wow.
And they were pushing Walk Among Us, this album here, which I purchased from Doyle, the guitar player, off the stage at the end of the show. He come back out with a wad of records on his arm and sold them to us for $5 a piece. And it was a great show. Punk was never really my thing. I like the more melodic punk stuff, but it was a great night. What a great way to spend Halloween. And it was a pretty rough show. Bodies were flying down those steps with fights breaking out, and it was intense. And that one's always lived with me just because of just the intensity and everyone done up in their leather jackets and being all punk for the night. But it was a real good show. So that's my number 3. My number 2, I loved the headline act, but for me, it was all about the opening band. Another small local show. And this was 1982 on the campus of Lehigh University in Bethlehem. It was Psychedelic Furs. I don't have the correct album to go with it. They were promoting the album before this one, which was Forever Now, which was produced by kind of our local hero, Todd Rundgren. And the band's great. I've seen them several times over the years. They're still going strong. They still put on a good show. They're not the most exciting band, but they always sound good. They play good. Richard Butler's voice is still that same gruffy, deep voice that it always was. But the band that really I was into the songs I was hearing, but seeing them live was just amazing. And this is a band that unfortunately didn't have a huge amount of output, but they were wonderful. I loved Australia's Divinyls and Chrissy Amphlett. She was like a wild banshee on stage initially. There's good footage of her at the US Festival. They opened up that 3-day US Festival in California in '83. She was still doing this kind of wild woman shtick. As time went on, she would tone it down, and her persona became more of a sex kitten kind of thing instead of this wild thing. But she was a great performer, and that was. I was standing there, when you're in a small little intimate venue, you're right there on top of them. And that was just a great night. One of my favorites, vivid memories of that show. So there you have it. Misfits, number 3, and Psychedelic Furs with the Vinyls were number 2.
Super. Okay. Nick, you're up. What's your 2?
You're on mute.
Oh, yeah. Nick, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a dog barking. This is going to be the first time, I think, in a Contrarians episode where you're going to hear the reference to Allentown, Pennsylvania twice in the same episode. So Keith had the Allentown Fairgrounds, and I'm going to talk about a little club that was in downtown Allentown that's not there anymore, called the Crocodile Rock.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
Yeah, how about it? It had good artists, but it mixed reviews as a venue. 2001, October 2001. So it's 1 month after 9/11. I got to see Ian Hunter there. It's the first time I saw Ian Hunter. And again, I was front and center on stage. And it was a very kind of parallel to the Lucinda Williams show, after 9/11 and all the emotion and tumult and country getting locked down, et cetera, to go out and see a concert, especially seeing Ian with his band, who was stellar, was really phenomenal. It seemed like it was a very intense evening. I have it in my head. The set list is online. I have it in my head that he had already written a song called Twisted Steel, which was written about 9/11, but the set list doesn't indicate that song, but I have it in my brain that he actually played it that night or a snippet that night. But his band was great. Andy York was on guitar, who now is the band director for John Mellencamp and produces Ian Hunter albums. Bass was Tony Shanahan, who's played with Patti Smith for years. And on drums, who's been with Ian for over 30, almost 40 years, was Steve Holley, who used to play in Wings. So when you have a band like that with guys who play with McCartney and that ilk, you just know you have a phenomenal band. And of course, he ripped through all the Mott the Hoople songs that you want to hear and all his solo work. And it was quite the crowd too. We were packed in there. But it was great. The focus is on music and the intensity of the performance. So my shows, as I've been reflecting on this over the years, it's less about pyro and lasers and tank turrets and blood and more about the performance. So Ian Hunter would be, and I've seen him since then about 5 or 6 times. Always great, but I'll pick that one. So they're not that they're interchangeable, but that was a pretty intense show. But he's really a great performer. Next one, I think I'm going to start referencing the old video, and I'll just rip through this one quick, and people can look at that video from March. I'll start with Pyro guys. I'll have to throw in one Kiss concert, but it wasn't Kiss at their most pyro and fire. It was Kiss in 1992. They did a run of club dates, and they came to Philadelphia to the Trocadero, which was an old vaudevillian theater, and they just played music and let it rip. And the place was packed, and there was high energy, and it was Eric Singer getting trotted out for the first time, and they ripped through everything. It was just a magical performance. And even though, my Paul Stanley imitation back in the mid-'80s is like, well, when you come see Kiss live, you can expect the most amps, ramps, and tramps. So it was none of amps, ramps, and tramps, but it was a great show nonetheless. I saw the Hot in the Shade tour, Dan, and that was a really good show. They really brought it on that tour, but I'll go with the club date for Kiss. So that's my whatever, too, I guess.
And I think that's the first ever Paul Stanley impression we've ever had on the Contrarians. So.
Well, I'm imitating other guys.
That was pretty impressive.
Hey, I'm not judging.
Good.
I'm imitating other guys doing Paul. People. Listen, people. So.
Oh God, so funny. All right, thanks, Nick. Never a dull moment. All right, so let's throw it over to the Parish. Parish, what's your next two?
My next one was actually my stag do back in the day when we had stag do's the night before we got married. I'll come on to the band in a moment. It was at Hammersmith Odeon again, which between 1979 and 1985, I spent half my life there. As I say, I'll come on to the band in a minute, but as it was my stag do, after seeing the band, there wasn't many places you could drink in London after 11 o'clock, so we had to go to find a club in London. We missed the last train home. We ended up getting the mail train home, got home about 3 a.m, and I was getting married at 12 in midday. So that was my stag do. And the band, we've already talked about them, was Def Leppard on the Pyromania tour. So that remains one of my favourite concerts. We were again up in the balcony, almost front, right at the front of the balcony, centre stage, and it was just a fantastic concert. As an aside, the support band was a band called Air Race, which most people won't remember, but they had Jason Bonham was the drummer. So a little footnote of, I think that was his first band. But yeah, so that's my next one. Stag do, Def Leppard, December 9, 1983. I'm going to come forward in time now to 2007. This isn't the correct album because I couldn't find the right album. It's the band Alter Bridge. I'm a big Alter Bridge fan. And in 2007, they released their second album which is called Blackbird. And we were lucky enough to actually, because we'd seen them before in London, we actually got given free tickets, me and my son. My son was a member of the fan club, so we went as free tickets for the actual launch of the album, which was at a small pub in North London called the Underworld. And when I say a small pub, it probably held about 20 people, maybe 50 people. So this is a band that is generally filling out 15,000 arenas, but we got to see them at a pub, as I say, one of 50 people. It was a fantastic launch, really good, met the band, got autographs. And the song Blackbird, every year, Planet Rock, which is the UK's sort of rock radio station, do various, where you write in and you vote for your favourite album or song. And the only band that ever gets into the top 10 of those votes is Alter Bridge with Blackbird. So in the last 5 years, it's been voted in the top 10 as the favourite guitar solo of all time by the British rock fans. It's been voted as the favourite song within the top 10 of all time, and it's been voted within the favourite albums of all time. The only album or only band or only song from the 2000s that ever seems to get religiously voted for. So if you've not heard Blackbird, either as a song or as an album, it's definitely worth checking out. It's just classic heavy rock, fantastic. So that's my fourth one is Sing Alter Bridge, 2007 September at the Underworld pub for the launch of that album.
All right, cool. All right, my next one, I'm going to go back to February 27th, 1984, Richfield Coliseum, Cleveland, Ohio. We drove up from beautiful scenic Marion, Ohio. And actually, my parents went along too, and I could drive, but I don't know why my parents went, but we went. Anyway, me and a buddy went. We went and saw Duran Duran at Richfield Coliseum, 7 in the Ragged Tiger Tour, and it was like a snowstorm. Maybe that's why they went. I don't know. There was so much snow. It took us hours to get up there. And then when we got up there, I remember we had a 78 Volkswagen Scirocco, and when we got out to the parking lot, it was dead, and we had to dig the car out. I don't even know how we got home, but we got home. But I was a big Duran Duran kid, so did get to see him. There were a lot of people there, so it didn't keep anybody out. But man, it was quite a snowstorm. The other one, I'm trying to go if I should talk about Allan Holdsworth or I should talk about the Knack. I guess I'm going to go talk about the Knack. In 1998, saw the Knack up in Cleveland at the Agora. There was probably, I've mentioned this before. I don't know if I mentioned this on the other show, but there were probably about 25 people in the audience, and Terry Bozzio was the drummer. And it was incredible. Yeah. You'd think people were there for Terry Bozzio, but no. Probably about 25 people. And it was great. We just stood right in front, just watched the Knack do their thing. It was great. So that would be my number 4. And then I did see Allan Holdsworth 1980. Was it 86? What was he playing? A syntax? I might as well say it. I saw him play that in a small club, and he was drinking at the bar before the show. No one was bothering him. But it was a whole syntax show, and it was a small club in Columbus. And that wasn't like jam-packed either. It's weird. Anyway, so let's throw it over to Dan. Dan, you're up. What's your final one?
All right, so I keep telling people that this is easily in my top 5 concerts ever because there was something for everybody. I went with my sister and one of my buddies. We went to Toronto to the Molson Amphitheater, so it's sort of an outside concert, but with a from the stage up until maybe half of General, there's like a roof. And it was, and I'll just show the props here. So opening band was actually Faster Pussycat, which when they came, this is 2004, okay? They came out with all dressed up almost in Nazi uniforms, with the black trench coats and the caps and all that, and they're doing this I guess what type of music is Nine Inch Nails there? that type of
Industrial? I don't know.
industrial version of is it These Boots Are Made for Walking? Anyway, some classic song, and then we're like, but it worked. And then after that one, it was like, like, you know, this one song. Then they take off their things and then Poison Ivy or whatever, Bathroom Wall. Then after that came Winger. Yes, I'm actually talking about Winger twice in this episode. And this was actually the reunion tour after they had broken up in 93, 94. And wow, that's all I got to say is like a bunch of deep cuts and hits at the same time. And see, that was for me. The Winger was for me. Then after Winger was Cinderella. So then we had Cinderella. That was for my sister. She loves that band. I like him too there. We all like these bands, but some of them are our favorites. That was one of my sister's favorites. So, but after Cinderella, until the headliner, my sister's like, she's looking in through the general admission. She goes, Dan, that's Kip Winger right there. So we just go off, take our picture with Kip Winger, and go back to the stage to see Poison. And I'm not a huge Poison fan. I liked him, but I was like, how? And this is 2004. I'm like, why is there 16,000 people here? Like how? Like this type of music was dead in the 90s. I'm like, who? Did I miss a memo or something? It was packed, and there was 4 great bands. I got to see one of my favorite bands, Winger. My sister got to see Cinderella, and my buddy got to see Poison. And Faster Pussycat was some sort of a surprise, I guess, there. But yeah, and the beer was flowing well. It was a good evening. I still remember it just like having a good time, and the music was great too. And there you go. That was Faster Pussycat, Winger, Cinderella, and Poison at the Molson Amphitheater. That's in Toronto, Canada. So that would be, I guess, my favorite show of all time.
Awesome. Excellent. Okay. Rand, you ready?
Hey, when Keith brought up the Misfits, I've got a little story. It's very short. Can I tell it?
Of course.
Oh, cool. Well, and I was working at our truck stop here in Reading at the TA, Travel Centers of America. I was there 11 years, and about, I don't know how many years it's been now, about maybe 8, because I retired in 2017. So it's been about, before that, I don't know how many years. Anyways, those guys show up. And the lady that I was working with, her name was Kara Lee. She knew I was into rock and roll. I'll talk about it. I sing all the time on the job and everything. So she goes out there. I'm just doing my work. And she goes outside and starts talking to him. And she comes back in and goes, hey, I told the Misfits that you're a really huge fan and that you own everything and you love them. And she says, look, they gave me a poster, bass strings, guitar strings that just say the Misfits on them, but they're actually made by Dean Markley. And I'm looking at her, I'm going, and then they come in and they want to meet me. And I don't know anything about this band. I've never heard a note. I'm just pretending through the whole thing about knowing them. I mean, liking them and stuff, because I don't want to hurt. Well, I didn't want to blow her thing, and I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And I thought, what am I going to do here? I said, I just got to go with it, just go with it. So I said, thank you and everything. And I had the poster and all that. They were pushing some album at the time. And it was kind of greenish and pinkish poster. I can't remember the whole thing, but a Misfits fan would know what I'm talking about. This thing is like a huge poster, and I ended up using the strings, but I had a friend that was a really big fan of them. And he wanted the poster and just the cases of the strings. And I said, oh, fine, I don't care. So I gave those away, and I never let on that I didn't know. But it was really awkward. Like, your stuff's right. Thank God they never asked me, like, what's your favorite song or album? I wouldn't know what to say. Oh, I love all of it, man. You guys are awesome. And I met Joss Stone one time, too, at like 3 a.m, and I was trying to talk to her. She goes, I'm really tired. So I left her alone. But anyways, back to the show. My number one, everybody knows who my number one band is. Yeah, you guessed it. But They had one
ZZ
tour
Top.
in particular. Yes. They had one tour in particular that really stood out for me because I've seen them like 28 times since 1972. And the opening act was these guys.
Gentle Giant.
This is the album that they were touring. I mean, this is the recordings that they were touring when I saw them open for Yes. Although nothing from that concert at the Cal Palace, July 1976, exists on this. They recorded this other places in America. But they were fantastic. The tightest, most together band I've ever seen in my life. They were just mind-blowing. How is Yes going to follow that? Well, they were touring this album on the second run because they toured this in 75 in America, and a band called Ace was the opener. You know, that big song, How Long Has This Been Going On, with Paul Carrick on vocal? Nobody in yet there for the Yes concert in Cal Palace liked that. They just wanted them to leave the stage. But then the second year, Gentle Giant comes around. So it was amazing. They called it the Solos Tour, but they did play 2/3 of this album. They didn't play Sound Chaser again. So, yeah, I think, you know, that of all the Yes concerts that I've seen, that one stands out my number one because basically the opening act, Gentle Giant, just were smoked. They smoked Yes. I mean, it was unbelievable. That band is so tight. If you're into prog and you don't know about Gentle Giant, shame on you. You need to get into that band. Except for Giant for a Day. Don't try there. Don't start there. And that's my top 5.
All right, cool. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Appreciate it. All right, Keith, what's your number 1?
Okay, number 1. This band I followed for forever. They're still around. I never hear anyone talk about them. I've never seen any kind of a album, anything on any of the shows, or anyone mention this band until just recently when Nick brought them up. But I don't really know. I know Nick just seen them, but I don't know what he thought of them. So I hope he was impressed with that. But I've seen them twice, and I couldn't decide what show that I wanted to, it's all about the band here, but I have seen them twice. The first time was in the mid-'80s in Trenton, New Jersey, at a long-gone classic alternative venue called City Gardens. And then I saw them at the Cleveland Agora many years later. The shows were very different because they started out being, I would describe their early look as Steven Tyler on acid. And then they kind of threw that all away and kind of stripped it down years later. I think they've been kind of wrongly pigeonholed as a goth band. I don't think they were ever really goth. They started out, they were a couple of art school kids who kind of were doing a very avant-garde kind of thing, and they kind of got shoved into the goth because it was something that was up and coming. But anyway, they were twin brothers from Wales, and they are Gene Loves Jezebel. This record should have probably brought them into the mainstream. They hosted an MTV New Year's Eve thing. They were on the Joan Rivers show. Unfortunately, it didn't happen for them. A couple records later, the twin brothers would split up, and they have a kind of a weird history. They've spent all these years from the 80s in and out of courts fighting over the rights to the names, and it's kind of hairy, but they are still out there. And Nick just saw them not too long ago, right?
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday, because it turns out one of my oldest friends from growing up and kid I played in a band with, he was pinch hitting on the drum stool. So he filled the drum throne, and I had a great time. Didn't really know their music, but he had a great band. It was the Michael Aston version of the Gene Loves Jezebel band.
No, it was Jay.
Oh, was it Jay? I thought it was
Jay.
Whoever is the guy based in the U.S. Sorry, but yeah, he was. It was great. It was a great time. He's the blonde one. So if that's
okay. So then you
Michael.
So then you
Michael.
did see Michael.
Yes, he's the one based. He's based in California.
That's correct. Okay, you're right. That's Michael.
My good friend Stephen Mills had drummed for a lot of people, and he was an LA drummer for over 30 years, but he had played with him a lot years ago, and he's not his regular drummer, but he pinched hit. It was a great time, loved it, great little club, and it was a good time. Yeah, I liked it.
So I think they just were worth a mention, and they're one of my favorite bands, and so I gave them the top spot.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Excellent.
great. I'll tell him. I'll let him know.
Perfect. All right, Nick, you're up.
Oh, great. I mentioned this 2 years ago. I'm going to give you the abridged version, July 2001. This is sort of timely because the headliner just passed away, Phil Lesh and friends. I've never been mistaken for a Grateful Dead fan. And in fairness, this was a multi-artist bill. I did not hear one note of Phil Lesh at all. Somewhere else on the bill was Derek Trucks, who I believe I saw a little bit of, but I was there to see Willie Nelson. So after Willie had done his set and after drinking copious amounts of Yingling lager and downing things like kielbasa or something, a bunch of us actually snuck backstage, which is really a Herculean task, something I've never done before. And it was an outside venue at a stadium in Hershey, Pennsylvania. But we snuck backstage and got in around the buses, and I played my cards right. And I snuck on Willie Nelson's bus with other members of his fan club, much to the chagrin of the other guys I was with because they didn't get on. And I hung out with Willie on his bus with the other fans for a bit, got his autograph, talked to him, just he and I alone. Everyone else was gone. And autograph. It was so long ago, I didn't have a camera on my cell phone, so I had an like a disposable camera.
Mm-hmm.
And those photos are somewhere. But great time, and he had great performance. I've seen him maybe a dozen times, but it was one of those. It was memorable, and it was the best, not because of the music, but because of the adventure. And the unabridged version is on that video, and it was just the best time. And then, of course, afterwards, it was clear we weren't supposed to be back there, and we were kindly escorted off the premises by his famous bus driver and road manager, and not allowed back in. But it was still great.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, how memorable would that have been? Holy crap!
Yeah.
But how could you breathe on that bus?
You know what? He didn't offer me anything, nor did I ask. It was good. There was a lot of white-haired, gray-haired ladies ahead of me getting autographs and that sort of thing. So I think he was behaving himself. But they were all, I sort of stood in the back or the front of the bus, and they sort of went up, talked to him, and kind of were ushered off. And got this. The bus is called The Red-Headed Stranger. It's sort of a famous bus in and of itself. It's really well appointed and kind of neat. But yeah, it was great. Great time.
Awesome. Cool.
Maybe you wrote a song about that, Nick.
Willie or me? Maybe I
Willie, about meeting you.
Willie. Yeah, well, maybe.
So look through that discography and see if you can find it.
Yeah, well, we did get a photograph with the guys I was with off the bus, and it looks like we have him held hostage. So that's the look on his face. Like, get me out of here with these guys.
All right, cool. All right, let's throw it over to Parish. Parish, what's your final one?
So the final one is December 1980, 9th of December 1980, and this is my favourite concert of all time, Queen at Wembley Stadium. Queen at Wembley Arena. So this was the game. The game was the tour, and it was just fantastic. We were about 20 rows from the front, down in the stalls, dead centre. Last time I got to see Queen at a relatively small venue. Wembley Arena is about 10,000, so still a big stadium or big arena. But after that, everything was stadiums. The next time I saw them, which was the following year, they were at Milton Keynes, which is a big stadium, and then after that, it was Wembley. So it was a lot. It's the only time I got to see them at a relatively small venue. And as I say, we were 20 rows from the front, dead centre. I had the unfortunate circumstances that, unfortunately, Freddie had a wardrobe malfunction, which I won't go into, but it haunted me for several months afterwards. That's all I'll say. But apart from that, the concert was fantastic. I mean, Brian May was excellent. They played everything you would have expected up to that time. They started with Killer Queen, which is probably my favourite Queen track. Went through, pretty much everything you'd expect. There was a few songs off the game, but mostly all the classics. and they finished with Tie Your Mother Down. And it was back when they couldn't do Bohemian Rhapsody properly live, so they would start, and then when it goes into the big part with all the multi-vocals, they would walk off stage because they didn't want to be seen to be miming or faking it. So they'd actually walk off when that bit was being done with all the light show, and then come back on. And the stage show was, if you've seen the stage show, the photographs on Live Killers, it was that stage show with the raised drum podium with all the lights round and the big colourful lights behind them and everything. So it's exactly off like Live Killers. So they'd obviously were still toying with that set. So yeah, so that's my favourite concert of all time, Queen in December 1980.
Wow. I do know a buddy of mine that saw Queen. It must have been 1975, and I think they played at the Agora in Columbus. And,
Right.
it's just a small place. But we got to see them before they were anything, and I guess it was pretty great. All right, cool. Parish, awesome. All right, I guess we've done it because I already kind of talked about my other one. Anyway, gentlemen, let's wrap this dog up. I want to thank Dan. Well, does anybody have any like an honorable mention or anything they want to mention real quick before we wrap it up? Yeah, go ahead. We got a couple minutes. We're fine. Dan, do you have go ahead if you've got something.
Yeah. Extreme and ZZ Top for the Recycler tour. That's probably one of my favorite shows. I didn't know much apart from the hits of ZZ Top there, but that was a great show. I would say Kim Mitchell here at the Shankman Theater, where I got to meet him for $10 backstage pass. Wild Hearts and the Darkness in Montreal Verdun Arena for the Permission to Land. And I'm actually going to put Culture Club, but the version that I saw maybe 7 years ago when Prince died, because I remember they did a tribute. They played Purple Rain and the whole place was dead silent, and you had purple lights on stage, and they did a great version of that, and I don't think there was a dry eye, or everybody was just like silent and just paying attention. So there you go. Those are my honorable mentions.
Yeah, I did see Culture Club in 98 with Howard Jones in the Human League. It was phenomenal.
I saw with Platinum Blonde, I was like, oh, Culture Club have a lot to prove because Platinum Blonde was great.
Yeah.
And Culture Club went, and I'm not a Culture Club fan.
No, but they're good.
I know.
Boy George hit it out of the park. I'm just saying. Yeah. Good band, good. Everything was great. Sound was great. Yeah. All right, cool. Rand, what you got?
Oh yeah, I'll just do one, but there's a bunch. But I'll just do one that was really memorable for me. Saw Pink Floyd for the first time in Cow Palace again in San Francisco, April 1975, and I was with these guys. I can't remember their names now, but they had this brilliant idea about following the limousines because he knew from the night before that they were staying at the Sir Francis Drake Hotel in San Francisco, and he goes, I know where they're parking their limos, and we could follow them. So we did. We followed all four limos because all four guys have their own limo, and they went 100 miles an hour across the Oakland Bay Bridge to get to San Francisco. Oh my God, it was crazy. This guy's running this Ford Fairlane as fast as he can, trying to keep up with him. He knew where to go. So we had parked the car. By the time the limos had figured out where to park, and everything like that in front of the hotel, we had already parked, and we were standing there waiting for them. And he hadn't told me yet that they played the night before. I found that a little bit later, and you'll hear why. So I go, David Gilmour is my hero, and I just watched this guy for 3 hours. They closed the show with Echoes. They opened with Half of Animals or some of it, which was different song titles, and I think you know all about those stories. But anyways, I go walking up to David, and I go, "Welcome to California, David," and he goes, guy in my ear goes, "They were here last night." So we followed him into the hotel, and we get on the elevator with him. I'm standing on the elevator. We're stoned. They're probably stoned. We were really stoned. And David Gilmour says, or not David Gilmour, Roger or somebody says push the top floor, and I'm standing right next to the buttons, and I'm like shell shock. I can't even move, And David Gilmour goes, "Never mind, I've got it." And he reaches over to grab the button. And he hits my shoulder, and you know how you are when you're really, really wasted. You kind of feel like everything's kind of slow motion, so you kind of go back like that. And I'm going, David Gilmour just pushed my shoulder. And I'm saying that in my head. And then he pushes, we go up there and stuff, and he says, they're with us. Those three are not with us. And they wouldn't let me into this bar because I was wearing a yes shirt. You're not allowed to wear a t-shirt. So I had to go back to the car and get this other guy's shirt, which was too small. And I put it on, and it's like, I just feel like I'm just being wrapped up. I can barely button the thing. And we go in there, and we're not allowed to sit anywhere near him. And I order a tequila sunrise because I don't like booze. So I said, just give me a tequila sunrise, hold the tequila. So I'm drinking orange juice and grenadine, watching Pink Floyd, and I'm going, oh my God, is this really happening? I was just like, it was like another universe for me. And Roger had already started an argument, and he was really getting into it. And David just kind of looked down at the table and went like this. And he does that in the movie, in the Pompeii movie, when they get in an argument about the sibilants on Obscured by Clouds. He does the same thing. So I was like, oh my God. And then finally we had to go because we ran out of money. But what an experience that was. That was really awesome.
There you go. Cool. All right. Keith, Nick, who else has something?
I'll take one.
All right.
Only to give give a little attention to my prop here. So right behind me is this Ozzy Osbourne promo poster from 1982. It's the Diary of a Madman tour. These were sent out by Jet Records. All the major metros would have had their own. This is the New York City version, which has 3 dates on it: March 28th, March 29th, and April 5th. 2 of those 3 dates we know never happened. On March, it was either the 17th, the 18th, or the 19th. I can never keep the days straight, is when Randy's, the crash took place. So those first couple of dates never happened. The band flew home to California and then flew into Allentown, PA on the final day of March. And they spent the day, April Fool's Day, rehearsing, and they restarted the tour April 1st in Bethlehem, PA, Lehigh University Stabler Arena. That was the first show of only a handful of shows that featured guitarist Bernie Torme. He did 3 or 5 shows and then was out. He just did it as a favor. Apparently, he and Ozzy had known each other and he agreed to do it. Brad Willis picked up from that point. But I saw the first show of post Randy. So it was an okay show. I mean, Ozzy isn't exactly the most greatest performer. You get all the I love you all nonsense and whatnot. And it wouldn't happen today because, he was hanging the little man, very tacky, and but it is what it is. And it was a very odd show. It was very somber because everyone was still kind of having a rough time with what had happened. But the hero of that night was UFO. They opened that tour. They were pushing their album Mechanics, and they were on fire. They saved the night for sure. So There you have it. There's my little, and how I got that poster is another story, but we'll just skip that for now.
That kind of reminds me of something. Remember a couple of years ago when the Scorpions were on their final U.S. tour and they were going to retire, but I don't think they really retired. They were supposed to play an outdoor show at Kimba Live in downtown Columbus. So it was going to be the Scorpions and Cinderella. Cinderella was opening. And it was like the original Cinderella lineup. They'd gotten back together. Whatever year that was. Whatever. Anyway, so the Scorpions canceled. And they were going to cancel the show. We already bought our tickets and everything. And they were going to give us a refund. But Cinderella, they were such good guys. They went ahead and played the show for free.
Wow.
So we didn't get to see the Scorpions, but we got to see Cinderella do their full set. They did the full set for free and didn't charge. You can't.
Wow.
What a great bunch of guys there. So,
Yeah,
know,
they're great.
there was a lot of people there because it was, Scorpions' final tour. They draw people, but it was so nice of Cinderella just to go ahead and play. So we had a great time. Ended up having a great time. So it was awesome. All right.
Grant,
So
I got 10 seconds, just 10 seconds.
okay.
First time and only time I saw Black Sabbath. Yes, open for them in Las Vegas on March 19th, 1972. The opening act before Yes was a group called Wild Turkey, put together by the bass player from Jethro Tull, Glenn Cornick.
Noel Redding.
And the lead singer was Gary Pickford Hopkins. Oddly enough, Black Sabbath gets Rick Wakeman to play on Sabbath Bloody Sabbath because Yes was touring and Rick Wakeman was with Yes at the time. And then Gary Pickford Hopkins gets chosen to be the lead singer, one of the lead singers on Rick's live debut album, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Isn't that odd? It's like they were all connected on that tour.
It's all who you know, Rand. It's all who you know.
It's
All
all
right.
who you know.
Nick, I know you've got more. Go ahead.
They're on that video from 2 years ago. I
Okay.
got a bunch of them. Save time, save time. That Stable Arena. That's quite a place. I did see Kiss the first time Bruce Kulick played in the United States was at Stable Arena on the Animalize tour. So, and I bumped into Mark St. John backstage. So that's a weird place. And you got to see Bernie Torme and Gary Moore. Holy mackerel, that's great. Anyway,
All right.
go ahead.
Parish, you got
Parish go.
anything?
I had a whole list, but I'm just going to go with one.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with Blackstone Cherry in September 21 at the Royal Albert Hall. And I'm picking that because it was the first concert post-COVID. And guess like everybody for a while, I didn't think I was ever going to get to see a concert again. And that was one of the first tours after COVID. They came across, did the Royal Albert Hall, and kind of still a bit concerned, I guess we all were at that time, about whether you should venture out and actually go to a concert. But I did anyway, and it was fantastic, and they were fantastic. They actually recorded it, so it's out as a live album, which I really like, and I play it quite often. But yeah, first post-COVID gig is very memorable for me. So that would be my honourable mention.
All right, cool. All right, let's wrap this dog up. I want to thank everybody. Dan, Rand, Keith, Nick, Parish. It's loose, fun topic. It's always good to have fun here in the Contrarians. Anyway, if you'd like to be on these panels, we'd love to have you. We have a Ko-fi. Buy us a pint or a cup of coffee. We have a Patreon. If you want to support the channel that way, you can. Take donations. Anyway, please like, subscribe if you haven't, and we'll see you on the next one. Gentlemen, have a good rest of your week.
Bye, you guys. Bye, everybody.